So I'm going to be honest, this movie is in some ways a little bit surreal. And it feels like something that might have come out during the 1990s, provided they had the budget and the technology to produce it. And by that I meant it actually seems to have been made to appeal to the target audience of it, which is kind of a rarity among video games and movies these days. And I'm not being sarcastic by saying this. This actually seems to have been a film made for fans of Sonic the Hedgehog, people who like the action, the comedy, the like friendship, the unique personalities of the characters, the banter, people who like the games, who played Sonic Adventure and Sonic Adventure 2 Battle and Shadow the Hedgehog and Sonic Heroes and watched the Sonic X anime and wanted an adaptation of that on the big screen. And they made a movie exactly for those people. And it's kind of surreal. Like, I'm sitting here, I'm watching the movie, and it's Sonic the Hedgehog that does a good adaptation of the whole Gerald Robotnik Shadow Space Colony arc storyline. And I'm not seeing like a bunch of like random political statements. I'm not seeing like anything other than just an attempt to make like a fun movie. And it's so rare to see that these days. And maybe that's the reason why people like these three films so much, because it's something that's largely made to actually appeal to the people who are going to see it, instead of made by people like a lot of the Star Wars stuff is, Rings of Power, and some other stuff that's made by people who actively hate the people who are going to watch it. They actively hate them. They want to embarrass them, humiliate them, and make something deliberately that's going to repulse them for political reasons. But in this case, we just got a really good, fun Sonic the Hedgehog action movie. I mean, if nothing else, it didn't lie to me. They said it was going to be the third Sonic the Hedgehog movie with Shadow in it, and they 100% delivered. Now, regarding the first two Sonic movies, I did not like Sonic 1. A lot of people liked it a lot. My issue with it is just that Sonic was the only actual Sonic character, I guess, along with Dr. Robotnik, but we'll talk about that in a minute. I don't like the human characters largely in this series. Some of the gun employees are okay, but I hate James Marsden and Tika Sumpter, or the Wachowskis, or whatever their name is. I just hate them. I think they add nothing to the story. I'm watching this to see Sonic characters. I'm watching this to see Robotnik and Tails and Knuckles and Amy and the entire cast. I don't really care about some boring family in Montana or wherever this takes place. So that was my issue with the first Sonic the Hedgehog movie, was it was almost entirely focused on the human characters. I get that it's an origin story, but the whole thing just kind of felt awkward to me. I kind of wanted just Sonic to get through it and start doing Sonic stuff. Sonic 2, though, I don't know if it showed that they learned or it just was the natural progression, but I thought it was a massive improvement because they brought in some more Sonic characters. They brought in Tails and Knuckles. I've always been a big Tails fan, or rather, I didn't like him that much when I was really young, but he's really grown on me over time. I just find he's a really fun character. He is adorable. Also, just I like that he's a super genius and he's kind of the counterpart to Dr. Robotnik. I think something to keep in mind when you're watching Sonic is a lot of the characters are significantly younger than you might think. Sonic is 15 to 16, and so if his personality sometimes is something of a kind of a bratty teenager who's rebelling and is like one of those "what are you rebelling against, what do you got" kind of people, that's because he is that. Also, Tails is somewhere between 8 and 11 years old, depending upon the continuity. And I think that also brings a lot of context to his personality. And I think it makes him more impressive as kind of a super genius. So I really like the addition of Tails. Knuckles, I think they did a very inspired pick with, picking specifically Idris Elba to be the voice of Knuckles. I think that that was a perfect pick. Knuckles is always known for being very serious, not super bright, and kind of a bit of a meathead. And I think Idris Elba, has a very serious, deep, masculine voice, and it really plays well for like the scenes where Knuckles is being oblivious and stuff like that. So I liked the second one quite a bit, and I was really hopeful heading into this movie. I wouldn't say I was hyped per se, but I actually had expectations. When I heard that we were also going to have, like, this was going to be the Sonic Adventure 2 Shadow the Hedgehog plot line about Maria, about the Space Colony arc, all that kind of stuff. I was pretty excited. And then I heard that Shadow was going to be in it and he was going to be voiced by Keanu Reeves. And I thought, you know what? That's a great pick. I mean, I would rather they just use the voice actors from the games, but if you're not going to, I think Keanu Reeves really fits the character well. So that was good. So before we get into spoilers, because it is different enough from the game to necessitate spoilers, I'm just going to talk a bit about the characters in this because this is very character driven. So Sonic is more or less Sonic. He's grown up a bit. He's kind of grown into the role of a team leader. I think he's had to mature a bit more by having his two friends. A kind of a theme in this movie is not a particularly strong one, but there's a part where Sonic just kind of spurgs out, gets really angry, and starts to try to kind of get revenge for his loved ones being hurt, which I didn't think was particularly interesting, but it did lead to some very good fight scenes between Sonic and Shadow. But Sonic is just his normal self. He's back. He's Sonic. He's the wisecracking hedgehog. He's a bit of a dick sometimes. He's arrogant and mouthy, but has a heart of gold, and he's the kind of guy who you'd always want covering your back. He is the spirit of the wind. He is freedom at its best. Tails, I like they used him properly. They had like kind of a not Resident Evil, a Mission Impossible type part of the film where they were doing like a infiltration to get some stuff. And Tails was their gadget guy. He was their Q. He made like all this stuff. He did some hacking and things like that. And I think they were good to acknowledge that he can fight, but his main strength is his very like high IQ. And it was cool to see him as kind of like the mission commander and kind of being the Q strategist of the team. Knuckles was Knuckles. Knuckles had a lot of really funny lines in this movie. Just him talking about like, I am a proud echidna warrior. I fear nothing. I am 1,000,000% muscle. And just stuff like that. And I don't know, I just found him really funny. He does the part of the straight man really well. And just how muscular and manly Idris Elba's voice is. So Knuckles didn't really get the center stage in this movie like he did in the previous one, but I feel they were very good at ensuring that all of the animal characters got screen time. Shadow, I think, was done very well as well. Shadow can always be a bit difficult because you don't want to make him too edgy, but I think they did a very good balance of showing kind of conflict in the character. You do have this, I don't know if it's a somewhat good person who grew up around Maria, or at least it's complicated because he arrived as an adult, but he didn't have any memories. So I guess you could say he grew up around Maria, who was taught kind of kindness and how to have fun and the value of friends and family and stuff like that. And he has, I think, a very good character arc. I think Keanu Reeves does a really good job of kind of balancing the inner turmoil, the desire for revenge, but also just kind of the scared child who's not really sure where he's going in the world. The various human characters who were not Dr. Robotnik were in this movie way less, which is good. They still inserted them in a couple of scenes, and it was the worst part of every scene, but it seems to be less and less with every movie, so that's good. I think they listened. We didn't have anything like that insufferable wedding scene, which dramatically brought down Sonic 2, and which I think was the biggest issue of Sonic 1. So that brings us to Dr. Robotnik. I get why they picked Jim Carrey. Like, it's kind of hard to pick someone for Dr. Robotnik. Like, do you want to make him more comedic? Do you want to make him more threatening? Sort of a balance of the two? And like with one direction they went that I didn't really like was how they dealt with Bowser in the Mario movie, where they brought in Jack Black, who I'm just not a fan of in general, but they just made him like a complete joke of a character. Like part of these villains is they're supposed to be somewhat intimidating. They're supposed to be a credible threat, but their arrogance and pride and incompetence is ultimately what brings them down. And that's kind of where the humor comes from is Eggman building these massive machines only to have his plans foiled. I don't know if Eggman needs to be the humor in of himself. And I find Jim Carrey just chews the screen like almost no other actor. It's just whenever he's on screen, the entire film just screeches to a halt and he just starts doing crazy Jim Carrey stuff, dancing and singing and just weird body comedy and stuff like that. And it's just, I just don't think it works. Jim Carrey just plays Jim Carrey. I don't think of him as being Dr. Robotnik at all. I think what they should have gone with is gotten like a really serious actor to play Dr. Robotnik and just had Sonic and Tails and stuff troll him constantly, and he just gets more and more aggravated because he wants to take himself seriously as this world conqueror. But he's just kind of a joke. And the other thing is Robotnik really didn't use very many machines in this movie. He had a couple of egg drones, I guess, and he had the egg crab, but we didn't have like any spaceships or other crazy stuff. I get that he wasn't really the main villain of this film, but I don't know. I don't like Jim Carrey. I think he's the weakest part of like the actual cast. And I think he does bring the films down quite a bit. And that brings us to his grandfather, Gerald Robotnik, who is Jim Carrey's, or should I say Robotnik's grandfather, who is also played by Jim Carrey, unfortunately. And so, as if one Jim Carrey was not enough, we have to have two Jim Carreys on screen at the same time doing Jim Carrey stuff with each other. And while there's some good parts of their scenes, it's kind of funny seeing how they play off each other, and they both are kind of megalomaniacal villains. At the same time, it just kind of degenerates into silliness. Like there's a scene in the movie where they are going through a hallway of lasers with like these anti-laser suits, and so they like dance through it, and I just find it very kind of out of place and annoying. It's to me like it's supposed to be an action like sci-fi thing with a lot of comedy spruced in through like funny situations or quips or stuff like that. I don't know if like you need to just directly have comedy scenes that look like they came out of The Grinch or Ace Ventura or something like that. So to me, I think that was the main disappointment. But overall, really solid cast. A couple little things that they could fix. They aren't going to replace Jim Carrey, unfortunately. Now, as to the movie itself, as a big fan of Sonic Adventure 2 Battle, I was so happy with how many references they threw in. There is a Chow Garden, which is like a restaurant in Japan where everyone was dressed as a chow. And I was just, as someone who played Sonic Adventure 2, as someone who played Sonic Advance and loved tending to the chow in the Chow Garden, it was so cool just to see that on the big screen and done in like a tasteful way, like done in a non-goofy way. That makes sense that they would have something like that in Japan. We had kind of a funny moment where Tails is like, well, this is where like we can hide because we don't stand out here. And then someone comes up to him and asks if he's Detective Pikachu. And Knuckles goes, yes. He does look like a Pokemon. And he starts doing like a Pikachu impression. And like, to me, that's funny. That's good. There's just a lot of lines taken directly from the games. Like there's a part where they're jumping out of a helicopter and Sonic goes, no food or movies, I'm out of here. Which is what he says at the beginning during City Escape. Also, just like in the scene where they're jumping out of the plane, they kind of form a formation that's like the flying formation in Sonic Heroes. They call them Team Sonic. They take some of the music from the games. During the big climax, they actually bring out Live and Learn, and I was kind of nerding out because I loved that song, and it really made the finale epic. And overall, I just feel it really respected the source material. Obviously, they had to adapt it, they had to change a whole bunch of things, but it was made by people who actually seem to like Sonic the Hedgehog and actually seem to want to make a real adaptation of these games. And I think by and large they succeeded, and I thought it was really a good movie. I really enjoyed it. Now, to get more into spoiler territory, um, the movie, the plot itself is kind of a mixture of Shadow the Hedgehog and Sonic Adventure 2 Battle. So Eggman is just kind of depressed. We have kind of an obnoxious scene where he's finally developed his egg-shaped body because he just sits at on his egg crab eating fattening Mexican food and watching Spanish soap operas, which is a little funny, but also once again, like, I don't think you have to make Eggman retarded. Like, I think enough goofy stuff happens with him being pompous to not have to do that. I think it's nice if he's a little bit threatening and a little bit of a credible threat. But that's where he is. The main thing is that Shadow breaks out at the beginning of the movie. Now, it happens very much similar to how he broke out in the game. He's at a gun base, he's hibernating, and I don't remember if Shadow was in a tube at the beginning of Adventure 2, but he gets released. We find out that it's actually Gerald Robotnik, who has been in prison for the last 50 years since Project Shadow was shut down, and he was released on the condition of building the Eclipse Cannon. And he's the one who's hacking into the gun systems and releasing Shadow. I remember when we first really get a look of Shadow, I was really happy because they took his powers from the game. He's fast like Sonic, but his main thing is his teleportation, is using Chaos Control to kind of just jump all over the place. But I think they did a really good job with that. Like the first scene where he's fighting the soldiers, he just keeps teleporting all over the place. And when he's fighting Sonic and stuff, I think they did a good job of differentiating him from Sonic in terms of personality, fighting style, their different powers. So I thought that was really cool. Team Sonic just gets the crap beaten out of them by Shadow the Hedgehog, who goes off to try to. I forget why he gets drawn. He gets called to another location by some sort of thing. I actually don't remember what it was that made Shadow go somewhere, but he leaves, and then the team also fall. Then Team Sonic and eventually Eggman team up to go and try to figure out where a mysterious signal is coming from that's sending out waves of Eggman's robots, and Eggman's feels that there's some sort of identity theft. So they go there, and it turns out to be the base where Shadow previously lived. And he meets Gerald there, and they both agree that they need to get revenge on humanity for the death of Maria. So for those of you who aren't aware, what Shadow was, I don't recall what Shadow's origin exactly was in the games. I know they call him the ultimate life form. I'm not sure entirely if Gerald created him, or they found him, or how it worked exactly. He's way older than Sonic, so it's not like he's a clone of Sonic or anything like that. But anyway, Shadow is being basically raised on a military base, and he comes across Dr. Gerald Robotnik's Gerald's granddaughter, who is just a very innocent, sweet girl, and she's not afraid of Shadow, and she makes friends with him, and they play together. There's kind of a funny scene where they watch a movie together, and it's like a Japanese monster movie, and the monster in the Japanese monster movie is Biolizard from Sonic Adventure 2, who is the second last boss. I would have liked to see Biolizard in the movie, but I get how that might not have fit. So I appreciate the homage. I appreciate the reference. It was a lot of fun just seeing that put in the film. So when they arrive there, Robotnik immediately teams up with his grandpa because he doesn't have any family. and he feels this is maybe finally the place where he belongs, and there's some big evil scheme to get revenge on the world and take over the world, and he's super hyped by the whole thing. So to just skip through some of the action scenes and filler, basically, the Eclipse Cannon has been built. It is a super weapon. There's not a space colony arc, but the Eclipse Cannon is, well, a super powerful cannon that can go into orbit and fire a beam that can destroy the planet Earth. So pretty much exactly like what it is in Sonic Adventure 2 Battle. It's just not attached to a space colony. So they're trying to get the keys for it. A bunch of stuff happens. The Robotniks succeed in getting both keys along with Shadow and launching the thing into the atmosphere. At this point in time, Sonic really has no choices left other than to go supersonic. However, because Tom got hurt by Shadow in a previous scene, Sonic is kind of focused on vengeance and is determined to just kind of go it alone. He wants to kill Shadow. He wants vengeance. And he's just kind of driven by his anger and goes all out. So we get some fun scenes then of Sonic and Shadow fighting. Part of the way through the fight, the Chaos Emeralds fall out of Sonic. And then they both go super. I forget if it's Super Shadow or whatever it's called. And I'll say this: Shadow's super form looks way better in this than it did in the GameCube game. So they both go super form and they start to fight each other. Gerald Robotnik reveals that no, the weapon is not going to be used to like hold the world hostage and take over the world and stuff like that. No, it's going to be used to destroy the world so he can get revenge for the death of his granddaughter. And Jim Carrey, or younger Jim Carrey, Ivo Robotnik is like, you know what? That might not be the best idea. Because if you destroy the world, I can't rule it. And that was basically what happened also in Adventure 2 Battle, is Eggman kind of wanted the cannon so that he could basically force the world to surrender and build the Eggman Empire. But he ultimately sided with the heroes to try to... and they start to fight each other, which is kind of the only downside of what is otherwise a really good scene and a really good part of the movie. So Sonic and Shadow talk to each other. Shadow realizes, as he did in the game, that revenge is not what Maria would have wanted, and that even if she's gone, there's kind of a metaphor that starlight continues even from stars that are out, but that he should still kind of respect her wishes rather than trying to get revenge for her. So he decides to team up with Sonic, and they go to try to stop the Eclipse Cannon. Gerald releases a whole bunch of robots, and we get Live and Learn. We get a movie adaptation of it. It plays a couple times when they're fighting the robots, when they're going to try to stop the cannon. And yeah, they're basically charging up, and just kind of like in the game, the cannon fires. Sonic and Shadow are able to hold it off for long enough for Ivo to turn the cannon so it's firing away from Earth. However, it does slice part of the moon off, and they're just like, oh. I'm sure that's going to be a problem later on, but the more immediate issue has been solved. Gerald Robotnik gets killed by his grandson, who throws him into the reactor, kind of like Palpatine. And so it looks like things are going pretty good. However, the Eclipse Cannon is overloading, and it's going to irradiate the entirety of the Earth. Once again, I'm not sure exactly why Gunn thought making this thing was a good idea. Maybe it has like a lower power version, because it seems like the reason it got such a ridiculous destructive power was because Shadow did all this stuff to charge it up. So maybe it has like a fusion reactor or a fission reactor or something, and it can fire. It was more of a precision weapon, kind of like the GDI ion cannon, but they just overloaded it. So Ivo decides to stay behind and try to stabilize the fusion reactor, whereas Shadow pushes the Eclipse Cannon away from Earth. As it's being pushed away, they manage to get a safe distance, but Shadow and Ivo both die because they're not coming back in the sequel when the whole thing blows up. There's some kind of indication, though, that they're able to escape because Shadow like removes his power limiters or the bracelets he has, which might be rings, which in this continuity allow you to teleport. So Shadow might have probably gotten out. So then everything's good. The team goes and has a party, and in the credits, we get an actual good after the credits scene that does what I think they should do, which is to kind of introduce like a hook to set up the new movie. And we find out that Metal Sonic is going to be in the next movie. I love Metal Sonic. His design is really cool. I actually really like the anime Sonic movie. It's a lot of fun if you haven't seen it. Metal Sonic is the main villain of that. Also, just the like his body construction, I just find really kind of neat. So Metal Sonic shows up, and then Amy Rose shows up and smashes the Metal Sonics, and that's good. I actually like Amy. I know she probably annoys some people. As I said, I think the thing to keep in mind is Sonic is like 15 or 16, so he's still kind of going through the girls are icky phase. And also Amy is like 12 years old or something, so she's kind of too young for him. I do think that Sonic, even if he does kind of run away with her and says she's annoying, does like her and appreciate her. I think they'll probably have a relationship once they're both older. But I think that's just something to keep in mind that with Sonic, I don't know if it's him really rejecting Amy per se, or just that he's kind of immature at this point in time, and so is Amy. And it's just kind of a question that'll be answered later on. But I'm excited for a fourth film. We're getting some more characters I like. We have Shadow around now, and they seem to have learned their lesson and have the human characters in it less. I don't know if like Jim Carrey is even going to come back for the next film. I think they've said they're not going to recast him. I really hope that they don't do that. That they do recast him, or maybe they bring in a different villain for the next one. I can't really think of any Sonic villains other than Black Doom. I'm sure there are Sonic villains who aren't Dr. Eggman, but I can't think of one that's like memorable and is in one more than one game or something like that. Maybe they'll have Eggman from the alternate universe or something like that. Or they'll come up with an original villain. I don't know. I'm not against that per se, but it has to be like something that feels Sonic the Hedgehog-y. That's not just kind of an asshole they put in there because they need to have some sort of person for Sonic to fight. So overall, Sonic the Hedgehog 3, I think was really good, really fun. If you like action movies, sci-fi movies, kind of comedies, just all-around fun films about the power of friendship with stunning visuals, I'd say definitely give it a watch. This one gets 2 thumbs up for me. One of the best movies of the year, honestly. So, God bless. And that is Sonic the Hedgehog 3.